Welcome to the Nordic Mythology podcast. I'm Daniel Farrand, owner of the company Horns of Odin. As always, before we jump into the show, I do have to plug our Patreon. First of all, I want to say a shout out to all the new patrons that we've had since we put most of the episodes exclusively on Patreon. We've had a bunch of new supporters, and it's, you know, it helps. It really does kind of help us keep going, keep the show going. It was the reason why we had to take that choice. So it's nice to see people signing up and happy to support, because as we've said, you know, a bunch before at this point, me and Max do this for free. It's something that we love to do and want to keep doing, but there are financial restrictions to that. So the Patreon is literally how we're able to do it. So if you do want to support, it's Patreon.com/Nordic Mythology Podcast. It starts from £3 a month. You get access to the entire back catalogue, so 250 plus episodes with some amazing guests, some great topics, all the Q&As. You get the Viking smut that we do, where it's me, Mags, and Claire, and we look at amateur Viking erotica. They are always a lot of fun, really good times. And yeah, there's just a ton of material on there that's really worth that small kind of price tag. And if you can't, then a 5-star rating, positive review wherever you get your podcast. Maybe somebody else somebody else finds a podcast. It sounds kind of menial, but it really does help. Just taking 2 seconds to hit those little share buttons, it kind of maybe just puts the clip in front of somebody's eyes who has been looking for something like this, because there are people out there who've never heard of us at this point, even though we've been going for so long.
Isn't that crazy? People haven't heard of us. Could you imagine?
Well, I mean, people who are looking for it, not just the general.
Just being an ass.
And I think that's it. Let's get into the show. I'm really looking forward to this. So this is more of a light-hearted, opinion-based show, the type that me and Mags do together. But we've brought back the lovely Richard Wakeman to join us in this conversation. So those who haven't been introduced to Richard before, Richard has over 30 years of experience working in museums. He is currently an assistant collection manager at the British Museum in the Britain, Europe and Prehistory departments, and is formerly the collection manager at Llandudno Museum in North Wales and a cemetery tour guide at Highgate Cemetery in London, and also the co-owner of Old World Remains Tattoo Studio.
Oh, take a breath. That was quite a long speech. Thank you. You got absolutely right. Thank you very much. It's wonderful. I hope you haven't oversold me slightly.
Oh, and no, never. And of course, my lovely co-host and in-house archaeologist, Mags Havgar.
I wasn't going to mention. I was like, he's forgotten again. He forgot to introduce me again.
No. I looked up, and you're looking. No. Your hair's looking good today. You don't have your glasses on. This is.
Yeah, I genuinely might have to go get my glasses at some point because my contacts aren't focusing. So like you are both slightly blurry, which is getting a little bit annoying. But but yeah, I was like, I thank you. My hair is, I mean, I hope my hair is looking slightly okay because I literally washed it a half an hour ago. And I was like blow drying it in a panic before the episode, be like, it's not going to dry. So it's kind of like I said in the chat before we start recording, you might witness it getting like progressively bigger / curlier as we keep talking because it is absolutely not dry yet.
So, Mags, you put together this episode. Actually, no, before that, we can get into how everyone is, and I can explain why I look sleepy.
Yeah, why do you look sleepy, Dan? How are you? How are you doing?
Me, I am sleepy as shit. I've had 3 days of a poorly puppy, so Rocco's not been feeling too well. I'm a little lighter about it now because it seems that they know what it is, but it started with Rocco constantly needing to go to the toilet, so he had diarrhea, but was waking me up. So the first night he woke me up at like 1, 2, 5, and that's very unusual for Rocco. And I don't have a garden to let him out into, so I had to like get dressed, take him for a walk, take him to the field, so he could go to the toilet. Nothing was really coming out, or he was just really kind of loose. Then thought I'd see how he was. The next day, who was doing the same, and I was getting a little bit worried at that point. So I sat up with him from like 1 a.m. till 3 a.m. just watching him sleep like a crazy person because I was so worried about him.
Oh, I get that. As a fellow dog mom, yeah.
Yeah, he's my little boy. I love him to pieces. I owe him a lot. And so I was reading and I was just sat looking at him, and he was fine. He slept fine. But then as soon as he woke up, he was like, I need to go to the toilet. At like 3 a.m. I was like, all right, let's go. Took him to the vets. They think that he's got colitis from somewhere, which is a swelling of the large intestine. So basically everything's kind of in there, but it just feels like he needs to go to the toilet all the time, but not much is coming out. But he's been finding himself. He's been playing, running. So the vet's giving him some tablets, and he's now, after 2 days of being on tablets, starting to looks like things are relaxing and going back to normal size.
Oh, I'm glad.
It seems that way anyway. So I just had just 3 nights, because he's the worry as well when he was waking me up, even though there'd be a few hours in between. I couldn't get back to sleep because I was just thinking, well, your mind goes to the worst, doesn't it? It's like, oh my God, this is going to be it. Like, and you just spiral. And I've just been a little bit all over the place for the last few days. And that's why
understandable.
So you had to put this episode together, Max.
Well, it's my pleasure. Also because, I feel like I didn't do all that much other than, get in touch with Richard, because this episode is a Patreon-suggested episode from our lovely patron, Ida, who read this really interesting Norwegian article. So, unfortunately, it's made it a bit difficult for Dan and Richard to read it, but I've read it. But this article was essentially about kind of like, when does dissemination of historical topics like stray from being informative to potentially risking being straight up inaccurate. So one of the examples was a museum here in Norway which made like this fun little short clip about the uses of pillories in the Middle Ages, or gapstokker for my fellow Norwegians, in which this clip was like one of the main reasons behind using pillories was to publicly humiliate women who had children out of wedlock and stuff like that. And the thing is that's not true. It was very seldom used for that. And there was no place in law texts where it was said that pillories should be used for that function. And actually, it was illegal to punish children and women and children for that type of behavior at the point where that video claimed that it had been used for that purpose, which kind of then got the debate going of like, well, then is this even historical dissemination? Because it's using inaccurate info to kind of inform, in heavy quotation marks, about this historically used object. Which that was one of the more kind of specific examples from that article that I picked up on, at least, which I thought was interesting. Also because I did not know that gapstokk was pillory in English, so I feel like I learned something, which was great. Expanded my vocabulary. But based on that suggestion from Ida, and she also suggested having you on as a guest, Richard, I tried to put this together fairly quickly. Because I thought that it was a really interesting topic. Ooh. Because this is kind of what the podcast is. It is dissemination. Mm-hmm. It is communication about historical topics. And you and I both work in museums, Richard. And this is probably when our disclaimer should come in, that this episode, I am here voicing my opinions and thoughts as the private person, Mags. I am not an official spokesperson for the Museum of Cultural History, which is my employer. And in the same way, Richard, you are not a spokesperson for the British Museum. I will
definitely say that again as well. Yes, my name is Richard Wakeman. I'm an employee of the British Museum, and they pay my wages. But I am not an official spokesperson for the British Museum, and we have a fantastic communications team that can handle all that kind of stuff. I am a private citizen in this debate. But maybe she just asked me back again because she might, like other people who got insomnia, they needed some boring museum stories from me to. Although I don't think this debate's going to be boring at all.
I don't think so either, but I might start doing the same to you that I did to Dan in the beginning. Dan's gotten slightly better at it, but you're so hard on yourself, Richard, because you're so fun to listen to, so I don't even know what you're on about. You could say humble. No, but you can't you can change my opinion. This is my opinion, Richard. I don't think you're boring to listen to.
I do like the way that the person working for the used to be imperial sort of British museum is brought onto the debate of changing history, or is history taken a wrong context and stuff like that. It's going to be an interesting debate, and some things I might just say, I'm not sure I can say yes or no to that one, but it's going to be an interesting debate.
Yeah, it is.
There's so many different angles that we can attack.
Yeah,
this
definitely.
From
before we started, you made some really good points as well. If you can remember what they were already. Yes, you did.
Who, me? Oh, okay. Enlighten me to my good points that I don't remember.
But you were saying it was just from a TV perspective, but from a museum perspective as well. I don't think it's just from a museum perspective. Well, I think in the old days, if a museum said something, it was kind of sacrosanct. Like if a museum put something on information board, then we're going back. Well, I can go back 250 odd years because that's how a bit longer my place has been going. So other museums can, a couple of hundred years, can say like, oh yeah, and that way every scholar believes it. Every member of the public comes in, they can go home and go like, oh wow, they had plastic in Sumeria. Isn't that fantastic, Dad? Because that's exactly what I overheard two visitors saying when they're in the Sumerian gallery and they saw a replica harp with plastic strings to replicate what used to be there. So a member of the public has gone back to their family and said they had plastic in Sumeria. So that's the kind of thing that you can happen. But then you get the information like the Norwegian Museum has put it down, and then people will believe it. But now you also add into the fact that people will watch things like Vikings, and I said before the show we're not going to start dissing Vikings for a whole hour because it's just on museums. But then you also have the element of social media and influencers and personalities, and they will also breathe life into a lot of bullshit that goes around, pardon the language. And it's very tricky to actually get. Well, that's going to sound quite controversial. Sometimes it's difficult to get one museum curator to agree with another museum curator halfway around the world, let alone controlling the dissemination of information on the internet as well. Everyone's got an opinion.
100%.
And
100%.
And then you bring in researchers, and then you try and get 3 different opinions, and it just, it all goes crazy. So it's like, who do you believe? Don't believe the internet. That's a good thing to go by. But
and because I kind of feel like that was the unfortunate kind of situation with this one clip that I mentioned, was that it seemed to me to be made in a way that would, garner public attention and, would kind of farm what's it called, like reactions and engagement. And the thing is, I don't necessarily mind that at all because of the unfortunate way that algorithm and stuff works now. The unfortunate part is the inaccuracy of the clip. Like if they had I understand the whole sex sells and, misogyny is, a historical fact. So why don't we play on that? But the unfortunate thing is that when you make, and it was a pretty cool clip. Like it did feel very social media friendly. It was kind of like hippie, like fun and music and like things were moving fast and la 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 la. It was really well edited. But the unfortunate thing is that then you garner engagement from portraying the past in a way that isn't actually true when it turns out that the pillory wasn't used that way. So then what do you actually end up doing?
Yeah, completely agree. I think there are some places that do social media like fantastic. They'll post about objects, but then they won't get any kind of interaction from anywhere outside of the nerdy people like us. So they do sometimes forced to go in different directions. And you want to attract everybody and then keep the right people. But it's a hard thing doing social media for museums. very, very hard. And you can get your ass handed to you on so many different reasons. And some people just, I'm not sure what it's like in Norway, but there is a wave of hatred for a lot of museums these days. The debate on whether museums should even exist is gaining traction in some places. Some people think my museum shouldn't exist. So when you try and do social media, no matter what you do, even if it's the most perfect post at all, you will get people slamming you for anything. But if you are 100%. Inventing history, though, that is something totally different.
Right.
But then it's
right, because it's like they're different. They're not necessarily, they're adjacent, but they're not necessarily the same discussion, right?
But what is the difference between a museum inventing a bit of history there and reenactors completely dismissing elements of history just because they don't like them on another end of the spectrum? There are people that there's invention, but then there's actually whitewashing as well. So what is 100%. What is the difference on that one? People wanting to completely ignore history and then people making their own bit of history.
Yeah, exactly. And I think those are equally difficult issues, but I think from my perspective, at least, my biggest issue is probably, unfortunately, the invention of history from institutions that are still, regardless of the public debate, are still by, I would argue, probably most people still seen as authorities on the
True.
issue.
Totally agree.
And I'm not saying that reenactors cannot be authorities, because they 100% can, but in the larger kind of scope, outside of, different types of communities and environments, museums still, to a certain extent, I would, at least from my experience, hold a certain kind of authority on, like, they know what they're talking about. So they're not necessarily the need to question the information you're getting.
You've worked in museums a while as well, so sometimes you have to admit that can't always be true.
I know, because like as I'm saying it, I'm like,
So, what, Rich, you said something interesting 2 minutes ago that I kind of made me think of something. What would be the difference of, say, somebody twisting history today for a post versus the winner of a battle twisting the events because they're the people who got to write it down because they won? Because that's another way of kind of twisting the facts of things, that not everything that's written down in history books is necessarily accurate either.
Sure.
Because a lot of that is wrote down by the winners, or a lot of what we know about Nordic mythology is written down by the Christians after the fact, looking back on it. And I think that's another level of all of this. But yeah, it's like a much further back, but it's still a kind of, it was contemporary at the time that it was, I guess.
Well, it goes all the way back.
In which case, maybe to things that people, hopefully the memes, the AI generated memes that flood the internet today aren't going to be the basis for history in the future, but
that
who
is
knows?
A terrifying thought.
Yeah, geez, my head went completely dystopian as you said that, Dan. Jesus.
If say we lived in a world where all the other, I don't know, it's getting so flooded.
If I can just interject into that part, I think some horrible part of me thinks that we're halfway there already, because there are some people on the internet who will just do history through TikTok or history through Instagram, and they've got sometimes a bigger following than their local museum or regional museums, and people are lapping up all their shit, and they've got like a cult following of people who are into history because they see somebody with like 1 million followers or 2 million followers talking about history, then they're going to believe it without doing any kind of research into that. And any word against that, they then get blocked or deleted, and no one else sees their kind of like argument against that kind of thing. So I think with the memes stuff, it leads on to like people like some people who just like don't know what they're talking about, or they do a little bit of truth and they lead people down the garden path just for that reaction, to get internet reactions and to get the algorithm going.
There's enough truth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think there's a great example of that, but it's not even that it's disinformation. It is. So this isn't a knock on this gentleman at all. I think he does wonders for bringing people into the Viking community. But let's say somebody like Jackson Crawford, who has an incredible following, does so much for getting people into Nordic mythology, the Viking Age. He's created hundreds of videos, super informative, but he has a following of people who will think that anything he says in his videos is absolutely 100% correct, which isn't always the case. Now, Jackson is a linguistics expert, and he's great at giving overall videos. But there's plenty of scholars who don't agree with everything he puts in the videos, and it's that kind of thing that you get this following that becomes the be all and end all. And we live in like a time where everyone makes these almost cult like followings, and they refuse to just look at everything as a whole and go, okay, well, this is amazing. This got me into it. The linguistic stuff, absolutely. But there's there are other people who specialize in all these other areas who are really specializing in the niche areas that have, they've spent the time and research these areas and have maybe a more thought out opinion. And like I say, that's not a knock on Jackson. It's more of just a knock on the thing as a whole of how people can get stuck with one person because it's easy and it's accessible, and it's, he's been doing it a long time. They're very user-friendly videos. And I think it's that kind of thing.
But that's where I think it comes down to, I'm very much not a fan necessarily of the whole individualistic, like it's all your responsibility thing. But in this specific instance, I do think that it is healthy for those of us who are audiences by definition, who consume content, to remind ourselves that people are by nature flawed and people can be mistaken, being that if we ever feel that we automatically take everything that a certain person or personality says without a grain of salt, that is ultimately on us to a certain extent. It is also on the audience, because I think it is, one thing is creators who intentionally cultivate these sort of audiences, but I think another thing is being a scholar or a researcher or a person from a specific field online. I also think is very difficult, because it is difficult in the sense that how do you manage that balancing act of being like, hey, I actually do have a very much like an informed opinion on this because this is what I do, but on the other hand, I am also just a person, and not necessarily everything I post has been peer reviewed. So like, how do you manage that? But like, I also think there are differences, kind of building off of what you're saying, Dan. There are differences between like legitimate mistakes that can happen in the spread of historical disseminations, which I have made plenty of myself, by the way. And another thing are intentional twists or inventions,
Yeah.
Because one thing is being like, oh crap, I said this. Oh shit, I shouldn't have mentioned it because now it sounds like I'm saying this and that actually isn't true. But another thing is being like, oh, but if we phrase it this way, which isn't necessarily technically true, but it sounds true, that will that will gain more traction, and therefore blah blah blah.
Yeah, like I say, it's not. I highly praise Jackson for his stuff. It's not that I don't think he does anything wrong at all. I mean, there's certainly been times in the past where I presented things to people from experts have been on here, and then been given back. Oh well, there's this video that says this. It's like, yeah, but that's maybe it's not wrong, but there's this other idea. But people get very one-minded when they find somebody they trust, which I think is a good thing. I guess that's what it is when you find somebody that you trust, which, I'd much rather everybody learn from Jackson than the Viking saga fucking AI creating machine that you come across. but what you said then as well, Max, is you almost have to twist everything a little bit to get things picked up by the algorithm. It's almost like you have to put a sensational headline that is like trying to say the complete opposite of what you really think to upset people, so they read it, and then you can quickly go, no, but this is what we actually think. This is the facts, and it's fucking frustrating. I hate it. I think
here is my
so
thing.
sad.
Here is my thing. Like, okay, this is just me speculating, and I haven't tested it. I've wanted to test it, but for various reasons I haven't gotten there yet. But I do also wonder, it's hard to, even before I'm gonna explain what I'm talking about, I'm just also gonna put there, like, this would essentially also be a difficult project to do because the algorithm changes all the time and creators aren't necessarily informed about the changes that are happening before they're even rolled out. So, you know, there's that. But if we're talking about, you know, algorithmic dissemination, specifically like online, I am interested in whether, I'm also wondering if we've been taught to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit as creators. Like, do we actually have to sensationalize? How do we know that we have to sensationalize? Could we still make a really good video that is fast-paced and snappy and try to make sure that everything that is said is actually correct? And maybe it's edited in a way that seems sensationalized, but none of the information that is disseminated is actually sensationalized. I'm not sure that it is the case that it has to be.
I think with my, sorry to interrupt, I do think it depends on if we're going from a museum perspective, it depends on the status of the museum. If it was a big,
I think you're right about that.
If it's a big museum, then they've got, it could be communication issues. There could be, in my place, there's over 500 people that work there. There's a communications team, there's PR, there's departments, there's front of house, there's security, there's IT, there's different infrastructure people as well. But that's a lot of people. But going from the curatorial to the front of house in a smaller museum can be quite easy. So it depends on that specific Norwegian museum, how it went. Was it the curator who did it, or was it the social media team, whether it is a paid social media team, whether it's a volunteer museum? And because I don't know the specifics, I know how hard it is working in museums sometimes. I know that sounds like that's a first world problem, but it can be very challenging working in a museum with different, even big museums, when people think you could just, oh, it's a British museum, you can throw money at it. There's not that much money to go around. It's all it's tight on all over the place. So it can be very challenging. And then you go to a small museum when you get multiple people or one person doing 101 different things, and they're just trying their best to do anything they can just to bring people into the museum in any way they can. They might have been having a laugh and thinking, oh, this would be a fun video to do. And it's generated, if we're talking about it, then it's worked to some degree. It's brought the conversation up, and it's brought people to actually go, oh, there's a museum there. So in that way, they might have done their job quite well. Yeah, it just depends on the actual systems that are in place in the museum and the communication between one department to the next, if it is even that, or it might just be somebody quickly videoing something, running to the other computer, and then just going like, must upload this before all hell breaks loose. If that makes sense.
And I think absolutely, it makes 100% sense, in the sense also that sense. Where I also have a lot of empathy between, especially when we're talking about, first of all, like small museums where just like maybe 3 people are doing all of the work all the time. I was
working one of those.
But also big museums. Exactly, I remember that episode. But also when it comes to bigger museums that have, where you also need to internally in-house, I have a lot of empathy also for, you know, the communications team that usually don't necessarily have that historical expertise, but knows kind of how to communicate, and then talking to different experts in different fields who aren't necessarily inclined to phrase things in a way that is understandable for a general public? And then how does a communications team that is not experts within this field not necessarily simplify, but make that information available in a way that is like there are so many.
We've got. I'm not sure. I think it exists in some form. We did have an interpretation department for that specific reason that came under the learning department or the education department. But I think there was a review and it's changed its name to something even I can't remember now because it happened quite recent. But it was interpretation department for that very specific reason. Translating, this is great. This is great for the academics, but if we're talking to little like 5-year-old, they're not going to know what the hell's going on, or how are you going to translate that for the demographic of 9 to 16-year-olds, or 16 to 31, or that kind of like, or the hip kids, which I am sadly no longer a part of that team. But yeah, that's what that kind of thing is. So, and you have to do that for social media as well now, to go out into the world and how people are going to interpret that, even like the simplest of words. Because we used to have, in simplest terms, we used to have the Hellenistic Gallery in the British Museum. But we did surveys, multiple people being asked questions like, what do you think Hellenistic means? And nobody knew. So we just basically changed it to the world of Alexander. And that's what it's been called for the last 15 years now, because some people just don't know what the hell you're talking about. So, and especially it's trickier when you have to do really, really detailed historical information in 30 seconds or 1 minute of video, or half an hour for a curator's corner, or for like 10 minutes. It's really, really hard. And sometimes as well, you want to do, if something comes up on the news and you want to do jump in quickly, a communications member of staff will probably be just gagging to just go, oh, this is great. I can get a couple of reactions, jump into the algorithm to draw people in. But then they can't, because they will need the curatorial input, and they can't if it's like 6 o'clock in the afternoon on the Sunday. Because I know a lot of communications teams, they do not have days off. They are constantly patrolling the internet and releasing stories or reels for their local museums or the big museums, and they can't just jump on stuff, because if they do, they'll say something wrong and they could get their butts handed to them very publicly as well these days. Because if any kind of little museum does it, people do a podcast about it.
Hey!
Yeah.
I will say, in the defense of us doing this, that the article of this episode is pitched, like the pitch was based off of, was an article made by the biggest national broadcaster in Norway. Right. So we are not the first people talking about this. The Norwegian version of the BBC covered this. So, yeah.
It's...
And this was not a small museum. Well, it's a small museum in the international sense, but it's not... I wouldn't call it like the smallest museum in Norway that did this.
Yeah. Whereabouts? Because I'll be in Norway in March.
Oh, let me see. Hang on. My geography skills.
It's all right.
It's Maihaugen in Lillehammer.
I'm not going to nod and say, Lillehammer. Right, cool. That it's nowhere near where I'm going.
It's where the Olympic Games was in 1994. Cool. Yeah. Which I was born during, by the way.
Thank you for making me feel very old. It's just fun
because, like, I didn't mean that. I realized that was what I was gonna do while I did it, and that's not my intention. My intention was more just like, everyone keeps talking about the Olympic Games of Lillehammer, and I was like, I literally was both present and not present for that, because I was, in a womb, and then I was outside of a womb.
I was working with somebody this week I've been working in museums longer than they've lived, so I don't have to feel old from that comment.
Yeah, that's always fun. Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to, I guess, historical accuracy and twisting things, I'm sure we can agree that museums should be as accurate as they can be. We can say that they should. It's so tough, isn't it? Because when you're talking about history, even the people putting it together you're gonna have scholars that disagree on things. And
what I would say was that the museums shouldn't invent stuff for clout.
Yeah.
is what I would say. That's the baseline. They shouldn't invent knowledge. Whether or not people in the field agree with everything is another case, but they shouldn't invent stuff.
My romanticized, sometimes idealistic interpretation of museums and belief in museums, and is that there should be that shining example of history, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And they should be formed on just taking care of the objects and taking care of the information and the histories for the future. And that should also be able to be interpret history in the future if anything changes with research, with archaeological finds. They should be able to incorporate that into the future as well. And they should not be frightened of the change that comes from it, in my personal opinion, and not a spokesperson for the British Museum. But that's how it should be. Sometimes some museums, there should be no I don't think there should be politics involved in museums as well. I think, and that's probably weird coming from somebody who works for a national museum. It should just be about the history and the objects. Because the moment you start taking a political standpoint, you have to take every person's political standpoint, and you get dragged through everything. It should just be the black and white. This is what happened. This is what is, and if it changes in the future, carry on with that. That's probably where I'll get my ass handed to me on any kind of debate. But I do think that's what museums should be for. They shouldn't shy away from the bad bits of their own history as well.
If it helps, Richard, I 110% agree with you in this case. And I think that is also one of the continuous challenges with working in a museum for my own personal sake, where I'm like, why are we not talking about our own issues? Why are we exhibiting? I'm thinking about a specific example in a current exhibit. Again, I am not a spokesperson for the Museum of Cultural History. This is just me as a private
If this debate goes horribly wrong, we might not be spokespersons for any museums that we don't work in anymore.
I mean, I'm on a temporary contract anyway, so I don't have tenure. But where I'm like, okay, we are deciding to exhibit these objects, and there's a point in this exhibit about repatriation. Meaning, giving objects back that were possibly and probably taken without the consent of the people who lived there, or lived there at the time. That is a point in this exhibit. And we have talked about that in this exhibit. We have mentioned other countries and discussions going on, and we have decided to exhibit these very specific items from this very specific place, bronze statues from the Congo. And at the same time, we are not mentioning that there is currently a very heated debate on whether or not our museum should repatriate these bronze statues to the Congo. Why are we not talking about that?
That's worldwide as well. That's not just you folks. Yeah.
No, I know, but I'm like, why are we shying away from the fact that we are part of the problem?
For a moment, I thought you were going to say you're going to return stuff to Lindisfarne if it's from Norwegian museums, but hey.
I mean, if that would be fun. That would be really fun.
I think that's a can of worms that we can open, and I don't think there is. I'm not sure there is an answer to it, because once you go down that road, I don't know where you stop. I think that's the issue. I think there's individual cases that make sense, but I think once you open the door, it's Pandora's box. Where do you then stop with the stuff going back to places? That's my personal opinion. I think it would be incredibly difficult.
It's hard for me to have a direct point in that conversation because I currently work in Pandora's box.
And
when you talk about repatriation issues, it's very complicated, and every different object has its own unique complications, and every country that's affected has its own complications. There have been objects, human remains from different museums around the UK which have given objects back. There has a continuing debate about my workplace about repatriation for different countries and for different peoples as well. And there is different conversations happening with different countries and different peoples as well. I do have to say again, even though I said at the beginning, I'm not supposed to have a British Museum, but I'm also way below that pay grade for any kind of debate. One of the issues that, and it's that kind of thing. It's always the British Museum who gets named, but then you've got the Louvre, you've got lots of other big museums around the world, but the British Museum, we are definitely seen as the bad guys around. But everyone usually forgets about the good stuff we do. We're always like seen as the bad guys.
100%.
Iraqi Heritage projects, the international training that we do for different museum people around the world, which we've still got doing at the moment. We do so many good things, but then it's always the bad things that we're always known for, because you never hear about the good things.
Because that's less interesting, right? That's less interesting. And also, I'm sorry for opening that can of worms to a certain extent, because repatriation is a different episode.
Although it was really nice to be in the news the other day for when all the good stuff was happening. It was like British Museum, Bayeux Tapestry, 2026 and all that stuff. That was really nice to be involved in, and seeing the banners across the Great Court with Macron and Starmer just there saying Bayeux Tapestry, September, British Museum. We have no idea how it's going to happen. We have no concrete dates, but it's definitely happening. So it's nice to see a good news story happening for the BM.
It is, yeah. We could completely change the algorithm if we all just stopped commenting and falling into the trap of biting at the apple that's put in front of us every single time that annoys us. If we stopped doing it and we all just commented globally, we could never do, but everyone was just like, we're all just going to comment on good stuff that we like. It would change overnight. The algorithm isn't inherently evil.
No.
It's just that it's there to feed people what they comment on and what they engage with. And most of us engage with the things that piss us off. I know I do. I'll scroll past something that makes me smile, but that's cute. But I won't type a comment. But then I'll see something that's inaccurate, and I'll be like, you motherfuckers.
But you know what? I think that's really interesting, because with my personal stuff that's been going on for the past year, where I've been dealing with a very vague fatigue condition of some sort, I've noticed that I have unconsciously made a change in that sense, Dan, where I'm like, I get so exhausted by things that trigger me that my algorithm has completely changed, because I've started to only interact with stuff that make me feel excited or make me laugh or make me smile in some way. Not necessarily like just kittens, but kittens are also great. But also like good historical dissemination or, fun stuff, like historical dissemination that isn't just purely informative, but that is also freaking hilarious, which is
anybody
impressive
to this,
as heck.
If anybody listening, if you spent 2 days only liking things that make you smile and make you happy, I guarantee that your Instagram feed and your Facebook feed will look slightly different. And then just keep doing that and it will completely change. Because I get fed AI bullshit because that's all I comment on, because I can't
stop commenting on the AI bullshit, Dan.
Help it.
You know what you're doing. You know what you're doing? You are doing the 2025 version of feeding the troll.
Definitely.
Yeah,
that is
absolutely.
what you're doing.
Absolutely. And that's the thing that, again, it goes back into this of changing or like tweaking things. And is it okay to? Because they all tweak stuff just enough to get a reaction out of people, because they know that's what's going to make it go further. And it all comes out to money, doesn't it? It goes further. The more people see it, the more ad revenue people make.
In the same regard, though, me and Gloria are having a debate. Gloria says hi, by the way.
Hi, Gloria.
She's busy in the next room just doing stuff at the moment. But we were looking at some of the comments on some of the Facebook posts that she's done, an Instagram post. And if she gets lots of positive comments, but sometimes there'll just be some people that like get into a debate amongst themselves, and then there'll be like 50 comments of just two people, like two Viking nerds, having an argument about a piece of art they've seen tattooed on somebody. and then you just kind of want to jump in, delete their comments, and slap their heads together. But then, if you let them comment more, it will push the post up higher because of the interaction.
Yeah,
so it's
exactly.
that kind of debate. It was like, these people are being morons, but they're feeding the algorithm, which is making the post do well, even if one person hates it and the other person likes it. And it's that one kind of thing. Do you delete these people, or do you kind of like think like, okay, yeah, you guys just argue amongst yourselves while we just like see this post go from like 300 likes to like 2,000 because like they're just disagreeing that a woman should be doing this or an Italian should be doing this, or like, people are weird. Sorry to just throw that one out there.
It's
no, but they are, and that's why I kind of want to challenge you, Dan, a little bit. Be like, why are the AI stuff? Why is that worth your time? Because the thing is, if you are commenting, even if you're rage commenting or trying to inform people, you are doing exactly what that post wants you to do.
Because I believe in the truth, Mags.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You're not going to change anyone's opinion in that comment section. No, the only thing you're going to do is give that specific post more traction, which is going to feed it to more people. So
nobody's ever read my comment and gone, yeah, actually, you're right.
You're doing exactly what the post wants. But then if you ignore it, then you are actually saying fuck you to the post.
If I ignore it, they win.
There is
no, they don't.
There's an evil part of me sometimes that thinks like, if I were suddenly to become unemployed at my museum, which after this podcast you never know, of all the photos I have of the museum objects and stuff like that, it's like, oh, could I one day just say like, oh, this was the belt buckle, it did belong to this king, or this helmet did belong to this dude, but there's it just can't be done. But I know I would generate so much grief. But I guarantee you, if anyone from the museum came out and said, this is this, and invented it, there would be a lot of people that would believe it, which goes back to your original point. So yeah.
And they might not be wrong. When it comes, let's say, the Sun Who helmet, is it King Redwold that most people believe that
unless you find 3 different sources, unless you find something which is like a sign saying this is the grave of blah blah blah.
Thank you, Richard.
No, that's what I mean. The museum can't. Let's say the Sun Who helmet. The museum can't say this belonged to King. It is King Redwold, isn't it? That most people
allegedly they think.
Yeah, but
yeah. But the thing is, the museum can't say that. But me as just a creator, I could say that the Sun Who helmet belongs to King Redwold. This is why, and there's no limits on me saying that. And a lot of people, and that kind of giving an object that life, I guess, with a name of who it belonged to in a story, then engages people into it, probably. And that kind of, again, is when is it okay to tweak things? Because a lot of people do believe that it's his helmet.
My personal opinion on the helmet, I'm glad I don't know who it belonged to. I think the mystery specifically for Sutton Hoo helmet, that is more mysterious, because there is
that's what makes it interesting.
So that I would love to know who used the Waterloo helmet. I would love to know. There was an amazing Iron Age burial where there was a guy found with, I think it was Kirkburn. He had a head of a boar in his lap, and he had spears put through him as well, and he was buried like that. That is the kind of name I want to know. I want to know who the hell that was. That's cool. But it wasn't. It was it a bad burial? I don't from the way I've read about it, it doesn't look like it was like a horrible burial. But for the Sutton Hoo, because there was so many burials around Sutton Hoo, there was executions, there was lots of different mounds. For the helmet and the garnets, the sword, everything in the ship, I don't know. Very, very kingly. I mean, some of the garnets, they came all the way from Sri Lanka down the East Road, down the Silk Road, which, coming down the Silk Road and ending up in Ipswich back in those times, very, very cool. So I think that we know it was somebody of high status is already proven. We don't need to know who it's, if it what specific king it was. I think that adds to the mystery. There are many kings that we do know. This one, the mystery is there, and I prefer the mystery to knowing, because if you came out now and said it's this king, the story kind of finishes then.
You close the door on it, and also then it becomes this thing of trying to then retroactively retrofit everything in the burial to make sense with whoever they name as the person who this burial is. And I think that's the interesting part, where like, so many people are convinced that this burial belongs to this legendary figure, figure. And my thing then is, I think that we are doing, first of all, genuinely, museums can't say that, because there isn't a named post or marker of any kind. So that would be incorrect. But secondly, I also think that it makes the find less interesting, because instead of giving the find the attention and research it deserves based on what it is, you lessen its value because it's only interesting because it's connected to this named figure. But isn't it more interesting to try to reconstruct what the burial actually is, and what was found there, and where, and what this tells us about the past? And what they're still finding there. Because I think exactly.
I think that depends on who you're talking to, because I think the two of you come from an academic background where you're already interested in all of this. But if you're,
I think that's a good point, Dan. Yeah.
If you're just Joe Blogs on the street and you're just interested in cool stuff, and you have a helmet who belonged to a mystery king, or you had a helmet that belonged to the actual King Arthur, or just some, let's say William the Conqueror, and you're like, this is his helmet. It's the exact same helmet. If you put a real figure in that helmet, it garners more interest. People are like, or just a sword. You're like, that's fucking Alexander the Great's sword. Oh, that's just a sword.
Can I also
of a ruler? I think the everyday ordinary person would be like, oh my God, I've got a chance to go see Alexander the Great's sword. That's really cool.
Tutankhamun's mask.
But can I also...
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, not just a mask.
That's a very good point, and I think that what you're saying is absolutely true, Dan, especially also like me and Richard, being so immersed in this world already, that is fun for us because it just is, obviously. Hello. But I think that, it is a really good point, Dan, but I do think I'm gonna shoehorn myself into kind of the position I have made for myself on this podcast a little bit. Are you ready? Because I do think there is an interesting part of the argument that you're making, in that, first of all, besides Tutankhamun's mask, and I'm being unfair with you. I'm being very unfair. But the only people that have been mentioned specifically are people of massive power. Usually, their power is usually attributed to war and violence, and they are exclusively male, which is a thing that has happened in the Western consciousness for a while, in that we have been conditioned to attribute extra attention and interest for hero worship. And I think there is a difference between wanting to name someone's remains and their leftovers, because that is interesting to connect it to an actual life. But I also think it's interesting to kind of evaluate, are we actually just perpetuating this hero worship of it's just interesting because it belonged to this heroic, historic or mythological person.
Yeah, but I think
Thank you for the nod, Richard. I really appreciate it.
I'm going to jump in with something completely different, not exactly museum related, which I personally think backs up that. And I'm going to reach into my cemetery stuff, because I volunteer. I do tours at Highgate Cemetery, and Highgate Cemetery has got loads of people. It's got Karl Marx, Douglas Adams, Michael Faraday. They filmed, was it Not Dangerous Animals, but Harry Potter stuff there. They've filmed, it's a massive film set as well. So you do all these kind of like, you do public tours, you take people around, and we tell about the famous folks that are buried there. And when I come to finish the end of the tour, because I love epitaphs, there is one guy who we don't know at all. He's just on a little beaten path near the very end of the cemetery, and it's called William Sly, and his epitaph just says he meant well. And at the end of, it's fantastic epitaph. Not as good as Spike Milligan's I told you I was sick, but it's fantastic. But he's nobody of note. He's nobody of wealth. He's nobody of stature. He's the bottom name on this list of people that are buried in a specific grave. And after you've talked about Michael Faraday, after you've talked about Karl Marx, after you've talked about all these really famous, powerful people in the Victorian period, I end it with this one person who we don't know of. And it's the one epitaph that gets people laughing. It's the one name that people can relate to, because everybody is all walks of life who come for the tour, whether it's like upper class, middle class, working class. Everyone can totally relate to an epitaph and a person that says he meant well. And it's that kind of like low status, no hero worship, everybody can relate to. So it's not the Tutankhamun of like cemetery. It's just like a low, everyone like a normal kind of human being, if that kind of backs up your point there.
No, but I think so, because I like, I'm not necessarily like in complete agreement with my own argument either, but it's like having two discussions at once in a sense. But like also like the hero worship is also easy to do, because those are usually the only named people we have from those ancient sources.
Yeah, I think it's just
right?
celebrity.
Yeah.
It's like a form of celebrity worship.
Are those the only people we should be interested in, though? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm going way off track here, but
if you've heard of somebody and they're a notable figure, it's just more interesting to go and see it.
It depends on the perspective.
For the most part,
when I was working in the last, one of the reasons I got delayed coming back to London when I was in North Wales was because Llandudno Museum were in the middle of getting a coin hoard from National Museum of Wales in Cardiff, which is a really big deal for them, because it was these 26 imperial coins that were being on a long-term loan given to Llandudno Museum, a small museum in the middle of nowhere in North Wales. What made it brilliant was the director took my ideas on board, and we got all the pottery from downstairs that was never been on display before, with potters' names and graffiti stamped into the pottery sherds. So we had the coins that had hate from Hadrian and all the kind of like big hitter emperors on the coins, but then he had all the stuff that had been found in the local community, which had local potters' names back in the Roman times, all their names. So it's the potter that made this. It's got their little inscriptions and stuff, and like a bit of a handprint as well. And I think that is more interesting to me when you get the person who made stuff, or even on the Greek vases, you can actually see a Greek vase and it's got the artist who's actually made it. I think for me personally, that's the kind of stuff that makes it more interesting. My friend pretty much wrote a PhD on Roman graffiti on amphoras that had traveled around the Black Sea, because you can actually, from that graffiti and for the people names on it, you can actually track different trade routes and where they were going in, and you can actually learn more about the normal people than all the big stuff, because all the big stuff's been written. It's the little kind of people that make the wheels turn that I'm more interested in. Like when you talk about Sutton Hoo, I don't think about who the king was. I think about the guy in the workshop making it all. I think of like, where the hell was this workshop? How did he actually have all his garnets? How did he have natural light? Did he have all these garnets from different countries across the whole world, even at like 600 to 700 AD? Did he have it like, we've got a B&Q set of screws here, we've got a Morrison set of screws because they're the same size, we put them in the same drawer, so has he got a couple of garnets from this country, this country, this country? Is they're all in the same drawer for this size? That's the kind of little kind of like things that I wonder about. How did he do it without like, false lights and stuff like that? That's the kind of questions. It's not who it was, just how it was.
But I don't think the general public care about that. Or
I think you're wrong,
strongly
Dan.
disagree.
I think you consecutively underestimate what people are interested in.
No, I guarantee if you put a dress in a museum and said this dress
there's a difference.
You know what?
This is just this is a pretty dress, or this is Marilyn Monroe's dress, people will come to see it because Marilyn Monroe's dress.
You know what?
If you have Cleopatra's bones, or you have the bones of an Egyptian, they will come and see Cleopatra's bones because it's Cleopatra's bones.
When it comes to initial traction, maybe you have a point. But I will say, this is where my dissemination personality comes out. And I will say, you know what? It depends on how you say it. I swear to you, I can make people, in a large group of people, I can make at least 1 to 2 people interested every time in almost anything in a museum, depending on how I phrase it, my tone of voice, how I introduce it, what I specify about it. But what I will say is that I do think you're right about there is something about specific names that makes things easier to relate to.
If you go,
I will say that because that speaks to an individual, a specific person, and sometimes it's easier to identify with something if you have a name.
I will say
that's you having people. That's you having people there with you, Mags, though, doing a tour to show people. I'm talking about getting people through the door. If you just said we have this really beautiful thing, or just showed pictures, I don't think that pulls people. I think a name attached to it pulls people off the street in. And I think that's why you see the Vikings a name attached to so many.
There is not a single Viking Age name connected to the Viking Ship Museum in Norway that is currently being, and that is the most visited museum in Norway.
No, but you have the term Vikings attached to to so many things just to pull.
But let's let Richard get his 2 pieces in. I'm sorry.
That's cool. I will say, though, the Sutton Hoo brings people in just on the name Sutton Hoo. That is a name before any different king. But it's...
But that's a name that's become synonymous with the piece, which is kind of doing the same job as it being named.
That's
having
but even
king's
before
name.
I started working back of house, so I didn't realize I've been working back of house for like nearly 8 years now in the Britain, Europe and prehistory section. Even when I was front of house, the most common question is, how the hell did they make that? And that wasn't just for Sutton Hoo. That's pretty much the main question. Well, apart from where are the toilets, and are these the ones you stole from insert name here and here? But yeah, it's usually how, or even sometimes why. It's not usually who. I will say that when it comes to certain ages, there are certain museums or certain places that, if you've got something from the Iron Age in Britain, it's like, oh, how can we link it to Boudicca? Because that will get people through the door. But there is also a debate that tried to get away from that to actually, because everything's if you put any bloody version of Boudicca you see, they probably got a Snettisham Torque replica around their neck, and they kind of go, oh, and that can be seen at this museum, or that can be seen. But yeah, I do agree that the name does bring it in, but when I've been walking around museums, then names are not usually important. It's usually like how or why did they do that.
I'm gonna wrap this up with a question just a question, and you can both give me an answer. And
do you want us to give you an answer before we move on to the Q&A, or after?
No. I just want to this little talk we're having now. I want to wrap it up and prove I'm right.
Okay. So you've already made me decide to be an asshole.
Well, we have two objects.
I've run out of alcohol,
and then we can. What we're going to do is we're going to bring it back round, and because I think this idea of attaching a name to it is important as to whether it's okay to twist the truth to get people into things. I think that's a little, but we have 2 axes. One of them is stunningly made. It's, I don't know, etched and lined with rubies and gold, and it's a really beautiful piece. And then you have a little shitty axe that's really rusted, but just in the runes it says belonged to to Ragnar Lothbrok in runes on it. Which of those 2 axes do you think is going to be most visited?
You're asking the wrong person, because with the flashy one, it's like, how old is it? Has it been found? Is it a brand new? It's just been made. Like, what's the arc?
But all I mean is to the general public. If you just put those out there,
I actually have a question. No, I have an answer for you, Dan.
Yeah.
Short term, the second one. Short term, the second one. For as long as the Viking TV show, kind of Ragnar Lothbrok, kind of mythical hero worship continues. Long term, the second one, because the second one is more interesting to look at. The second one, people will come take pictures of. They will draw it. They will get it tattooed. They will ask, where was it made? Who was it made by? How was it made? Where did the metal come from? Who did the etching? Where did this design come from? Why was it used that way? Was it usable or was it just for show?
So we're saying the shiny one was an old archaeological find as well then? Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah.
That was my assumption.
Oh, yeah, that's obvious. Yeah, that's a great answer because
both dated to the but that's a historian scholarly answer.
No, that is me having worked 10 years with doing museum dissemination answer.
The person on the street would be like, I want to see Ragnarok.
But doesn't that also precipitate the fact that that person has to know who Ragnar Lothbrok is?
I'd want to see Ragnar's.
But that is also a very small amount of people who knows who Ragnar. That's a very specific niche of people who knows who he is. People who are just interested in history as a thing of flashy things from the old ages, whatever, are gonna go see the first one. They're gonna go see the.
This is where I'm going to play devil's advocate. I was working with the Egyptian department in the BM, and we did. There was an exhibition that we traveled because we travel around in my job as well. We do exhibitions all over the place. That's why I did the medieval exhibition. Just did 2 days there in Norwich Castle, which has been a project that's been going on for the last 4 years, and it's just finished. So I highly recommend it. Medieval history, Norwich Castle, good plug. But while I was working for the Egyptian department, we did a pharaohs exhibition that was traveling around Spain. It's gone to Australia, and I think it's been to Canada, and it's traveling around the world. And as part of that exhibition, there was a short bow and an axe, and in hieroglyphics, it's got the name of the person who had this bow, which is pretty cool. And flash forward, I went to the Traveling Tutankhamun exhibition that was at the Saatchi Gallery a couple of years ago, and it had allegedly Tutankhamun's bow. And that was pretty damn fucking cool, I have to admit. I'm sorry for the language, but that was awesome.
But yeah, so that's me. That would be really cool.
But it was in such nice condition. It was definitely a museum piece, and it was just awesome. But I think it gets people through the door. But archaeologically speaking, yeah, I think if it was nice and shiny as well, because then you ask the question of like, how the hell was this preserved that well? Like the stuff from Sutton Hoo again. Sorry to keep using that as an example, but Sutton Hoo was some of it was found in pretty much the same state it's in now. It was just incredible condition.
It's not that I don't appreciate.
And the research between that is still ongoing. We only found out a couple of years ago where the garnets came from, and that was because we had to send it to Paris to the Louvre to actually do the experiments on, and that's how we found. That's all that. It was shiny, it's pretty, and it's still answering questions. Whereas if you got a name on it, it's already done.
Yeah, you don't really.
It's not that I don't appreciate the hard work. I just think that museums have to compete. Again, this goes back to this whole myth thing. Is it okay for museums to tweak things? Because museums have to compete with even your time of working in the British Museum and in museums in general, Richard. Now, I don't want to hammer the point of how long you've been there and your age, but it's a while. And even in your lifetime, you must have seen a difference in people's attention span,
even my own,
to how they interact with things. We're fed, our phones, and even the best of us who try not to be, and I try not to be, but I'll catch myself stuck in a little scroll of shining little things just popping out of me, and everything's just quick information. Everything, too long didn't read. How many times have we all seen that? Because we can't be asked to read something rather than taking in all the information, and everything's just quick. And so you must have seen it now. Just people that probably don't even read the little placards at the museum. I would say most people just look at the objects. They don't even take the time to read all the information about them and really learn what they are. They just look and go, looks
true.
really cool. And then maybe the one that grabs them, they'll go, ooh, okay, now I'll kind of read more about that. So I think, how do museums do that? And is it okay for museums to bend things a little bit? And like I said, just things that will grab people's attention by adding possible names to things, or it was maybe used here at this really cool battle that everyone knows about. We're not 100% sure, but maybe it just makes people pause long enough to go, okay, I'm going to read
that whole question
now.
could be the things I've seen change in museums in 30 years. That could be a whole show. Again, for the insomniacs out there, coming to you in next year, Nordic Mythology podcast, Richard can put people to sleep with museum answers. But I, just as an example of how things have changed, when I first started work in museums, mobile phones didn't really exist. And if people, when I started work at the British Museum in 2002, we had to ask people to leave if they spoke on a phone. Yeah, because people did speak on phones sometimes instead of just WhatsApping and stuff. So people said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I'll just go away and come back." And the reason I know this is because if those eagle-eyed amongst you can spot this USS Defiant from Deep Space Nine, I told the actor who plays Dr. Julian Bashir to leave the gallery number 10 because he was speaking on his mobile phone at the time. It was probably one of the most embarrassing fucking things I've ever done in museum life, because it's my favorite Star Trek show and he was a hero of mine. And he came back 5 minutes later and just went, "I'm really sorry." And I just went, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize it was you. I'm a really big fan of the show." And then I kind of like ran away. But that's how much things have changed. Now people can use their phones. And sorry I went on that rant. So people can use their phones and they take photos of everything. And that's a whole different debate as well. And people do interpret labels differently. Some people just look at stuff and they'll just pass by. So that's where there was an argument of less is more. So you put less objects in a display case to make it more powerful for the ones that are in there, because people don't want to concentrate on whole display cases. But some museums have different philosophies as well. Some museums are still going old school. Let's just throw everything, see what works. And then there is an argument that some people do like that old kind of Victorian aspect of just like, oh, here's what we've got from here, dump it in, everyone should like that. But there are, less is more. I do think I am one of those people that reads every single label of something I find interesting. There are sometimes I go to a museum and I completely ignore certain sections just because I don't find them interesting. Gloria calls me a bit of a ceramic snob because I see ceramics and Victorian stuff, and I just kind of go, "No, I'm good, thank you very much." Walk past.
I'm sorry to say I'm very similar in that.
Yeah, I can't help it.
I'm like, oh, more porcelain?
Yeah. It's very rare that something gets me. And if it does...
I'm sorry to all pottery, porcelain.
Yeah. But when it comes to the labels, we've got the Vindlander tablets at the museum. And it's heartbreaking sometimes because they're not really important people, but they have become the most important object in the British Museum. There was a big vote a couple of years back, and out of the Rosetta Stone, out of Sutton Hoo, Lewis Chessman, all these amazing objects, the Vindalad tablets got voted number 1 by the public. And it's just these little bits of brown, look like cardboard, that were found in a puddle at Vindalanda. And it was letters from people up in the garrison town at Vindalanda, and they translated them. And it wasn't like "Glory to Rome." It was "Please send me some socks. The weather up here is terrible. Please send me some skins. I require more beer for the army," or wine and stuff like that. And there's a birthday invitation to a lady's
Very
sister.
humanizing.
Exactly. And that's when you put names to that, and you can put names to that because there is names in it. That's when it kind of like hits you. And it also makes you think like, oh, nothing has changed. There was a guy who was writing a letter to, I think, the prefect, saying, "I've been beaten unjustly by 2 centurions." And it's, as a man from overseas, where I've been beaten unjustly, and it's like complaining about police brutality a couple of thousand years ago, up near Scotland. Life hasn't changed much. So yeah, I think it's when you attach names like that, those are the kind of things that pull on my heartstrings. Does that answer your question a little bit?
There's also like...
Or did I just skip it? Sorry.
Yeah. No.
No, but I
don't think there is an answer either. I think it's...
that's the fun part of this discussion, that I don't think that there is a specific answer, but kind of to build on your point a little bit, Richard, and also kind of to your point, Dan, with like the whole name thing, is that there is one of my favorite things in the now closed exhibit at the Viking Ship Museum, and it's, for those of you who don't know, it's closed because they're rebuilding the museum and it's going to become a big hoopla and blah,
They're
blah, blah.
doing such good work out there too.
Such good work. I'm so happy to not be involved in that project, because I would be put on like heart medicine, I think, because my cholesterol levels would spike. It would be intense.
Yeah, definitely.
But there is, the Oseberg find is also a name. Like Sutton Hoo, it has become a thing in and of itself. And in part of the burial, there is a bucket, which is like, it's a nice bucket. It has like some, I think it's brass bands around it. Like, it's being a bucket, it's a pretty fancy bucket, but it's still a bucket. But inside that bucket, there is a little rune inscription that is really hard to see. Like, I couldn't show people when we looked at the display cases, but there is a rune inscription on the inside that has been translated to Sigrisin, or this is Sigrid's. And that's also that, like, and people would then, of course, ask, like, oh, is that one of the women in the burial? And I'd be like, I don't know. But this bucket did at some point belong to someone called Sigrid.
Yeah. Which is very cool.
And that's just like how you write your name in your clothes when you go to preschool. Like, because in case you lose... Yeah.
I'm joking.
Or because you come from a lower income family and your parents can't afford to buy you a new jacket. You know?
My name was in all my clothes.
Yeah, and all my stuff. But like, just kind of those things where like, it's also a universal thing that like, this is my thing.
Yeah.
This is if someone finds the bucket, it's my bucket, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so because we're gonna run out of time.
Oh, let's get to your list though.
We'll save the list for the Q&A. My little list of...
Because I saw a comment in the chat that I want to touch on, but we'll do that in the Q&A then.
There's a chat section. I can't read it. Oh my God! There's 38 comments. Okay, right.
Which comment was
it was from Jennifer, who I hope I'm like I couldn't find it right now, but like she said that her husband early in the episode asked when we were going to get to the myth busting of the Viking Age stuff, and then she explained that the Viking Age myth busting has kind of been like a promo thing, and apparently he gave her a side eye, and I'm like, I love how we fell into the same trap that we discussed.
I think also hands up in my Rocco themed week, I may have misunderstood the episode as well.
But to be completely honest too,
a little bit.
But what I kind of love about in our own defense, when it comes to this podcast, our promos for unrecorded episodes are always going to be a bit inaccurate because we never know exactly what we end up discussing. Right. We have like a theme, and then we see whether we'll stick to it or not, just to kind of cover our own asses a little bit. But I will say, for people who aren't aware of this already, our promos won't necessarily match 100% with the episode we end up recording, because we do this organic thing where the conversation just kind of evolves as we go.
Yeah. Well, this came about because it was just our guest couldn't do a Sunday, and they've booked for, I think it's Tuesday. Yeah. We were like, should we still do something on Sunday anyway? What shall we talk about?
And then Ida came to the rescue.
Yeah, so but I like these where we just can just talk about something we don't really ever get.
Well, I hope I've mythbusted that people in museums in general are not going to be able to answer every single question or know everything as well, which is a whole different debate.
You absolutely have.
Even my time, I know you got to move on, but even in the time scale of like my department goes from Britain, Europe, and prehistory, go from Neolithic all the way up to Victorian jury.
That's a very big time span.
And there's my boss, there's me, and there's 4 other amazing people on my team. And we handle all the objects going from my whole department. So I've got one colleague who is into Victorian ceramics and Victorian jewelry, but they also have to handle Neolithic axes and stones and Viking age material and stuff like that. I had another colleague who was interested and worked in medieval textiles, but then had to install Viking axes and stuff like that, and then got a load of crap from the internet when the Viking axe was put in upside down. But they went with how the axe felt on the mount, so they were going object safety because they weren't a weapon specialist. So it's very tricky to do. So if there's a lot of even curatorial, it's like that as well. There's a curatorial, there is a curator of the Victorian period, but they also have to go around everything in that time period across the whole of Europe, which is not what their PhD was. But so the museums in general, they learn a lot more from visitors and researchers as well. So yes, it's a bit tricky. Sorry, I went on a ramble then.
Well, no, but I like it because there's also like it does come a bit back to the fact that many of us are a bit overworked and overextended. And also it comes back to the fact that museums, although there are institutions, are also made up of people who will sometimes make mistakes by just taking different kind of considerations than the public would expect, or by just not always being, super on top of their game. Yeah. And that's okay.
I think it's, and also everyone has to remember that for the most of history, it's just people's best guesses. Very rarely it's ever, this is 100% exactly what it was.
Alternative facts, then.
A little, it's all, but that's what makes it so interesting, is that we can talk about this discussion on so many other levels of whether it's, even most things have scholarly debates on whether it's one thing or another, or the nuances amongst it, then how people interpret it, then how people then may take photos of that and share it on their own social media with the facts that they got from the museum, but maybe they misremembered them and put it out there, or they willfully change things. And then you have the whole future of AI talk that people can literally just type in, I want to make the Sutton Hoo, make me a quick post on the Sutton Hoo helmet that's engaging. They get the text, they bang it on a meme, post it, takes 30 seconds, and they don't really know whether the information's wrong or not. They just kind of trust that AI's done its thing, and they don't care as long as, again, it's the last thing to touch on is there, should people have a responsibility, include whether it's content creators, TV shows, because again, I think a lot of people get from TV shows, get their history, TV shows, movies, should they have a responsibility to try and be accurate, but then also they want to be entertaining, and sometimes you'll pull a character into a fictional world. How do you deal with that?
I think with films, I'm going to sound really browbeaten and callous on this one. I think with films, content, this is going to sound harsh as well, content creators as well, I think greed outweighs everything these days. The more hits, the more money, the more income generation. I think it's on the onus of people to find multiple sources these days before they start ranting about stuff online. It's more work, but that's not just for this, it's for everything with news, how they get all information these days. Don't just look at one website for news. Like, don't just look at Sky News, don't just look at BBC, don't just look at CNN, don't just look at Fox. You have to find everything, which is frustrating, and it shouldn't be like that with history as well. But yeah, don't watch like one content creator, because they, at the end of the day, if they're making money out of it, they're going to do stuff for their own specific angle.
What I will say when it comes to content creation specifically, if you are following a content creator who does a lot of historical dissemination and never ever specifies where they got their information from, be skeptical. If it is a content creator who makes it possible for you to somehow find the sources, either they have it in a pinned comment or as part of the caption, or they have a shared Google Doc that you can look at, or they specify specific articles in whatever medium they're making, then I'm more inclined to not necessarily trust inherently, but be like, I have more faith that you have at least looked into what you were talking about. Yep. And when it comes to film and TV, and this goes for content creation as well, but I also think that it entirely depends on what you're going for. As in, like, are you using the historical setting just as a backdrop for the story you're telling, or are you trying to actually accurately depict a period of history? I think that discussion is gonna, at least in historically interested circles, gonna become very prevalent now with the new Odyssey movie.
Yeah.
In the works, because I have seen from people who are not in any historically kind of based communities that they've reacted really positively to that one poster with Matt Damon that was released, and people who are in historically based communities I've seen trash that poster from here to the moon, because apparently they've just kind of, I'm not an expert in Greek or Roman or Hellenistic or Minoan culture, but they've just kind of crashed face first into kind of everything, but also nothing at the same time, apparently. So I'm interested to see when that movie comes out, if it's just trying to be a myth on screen, or if it's making the case for being an accurate representation of some sort of historical event, possibly.
Yeah, I don't know. I watched the TV show Spartacus a few years back, and I disconnected my brain, although thankfully it's not.
Was it accurate?
I watched it with my best friend who was PhD'd in Greek and Rome life, and they absolutely detested the first 5 episodes until they could actually disconnect their brain and just go like, this is not historical accurate, we'll just go with it. But in the same respect, I don't know if any of you followed the show, recently they have done kind of like a revival from a character that was definitely killed in, I think, series 3, because he got his head lopped off at
100% actually dead.
100%. He got his head chopped off at Vesuvius, but he is now going to be leading the new show from an alternative reality. Apparently, it hasn't come out yet, but the main
that's Marvel. Marvel
has done that to
us. Marvel have allowed us to do that.
The thing is, in this new show, there is going to be a female gladiator versus male gladiators, or versus in the trailers they're presented it's going to be about a female gladiator, which cue people absolutely slating it, saying, I can't believe they've gone woke. I can't believe they've gone historically inaccurate. And it's like, oh, actually no. And that's when my friend kicked in and a few other people, and it's probably not going to be historic.
Like, honey,
there were female gladiators, deal with it. And there is evidence for this as well. So my friend the historian has just kind of gone like, oh, I might actually watch it, because they might get a little bit more accurate than they were before. It's going to be trashy like the old series was, but they put this little bit in, and the person who hated it with a passion has now kind of gone like, oh cool, this could be quite interesting. But all of the vitriol about it, of people immediately saying it's gone woke, and hated it because it's different from the original show, now they're actually doing something a little bit more historically accurate as well. You never know. It's interesting, the debates.
But to piggyback on that, I think that media companies also know that going woke will get a certain amount of free advertisement.
But at the same time, is it going woke if it's based on actual historical information?
No, but let's say things like, not that, but I mean,
I know exactly what you mean. I understand.
You know, like the new Harry Potter TV show, that's got a huge controversy around it, with the actor playing Snape, or changing Ariel. Like, I think companies do things.
For a moment, I thought you were about watching like that, but I've just realized. Sorry.
No. Right, the Little Mermaid. I think the companies will do that because they know that it brings a certain amount of online controversy, and it's just, at this point, it's just free advertisement, because they just know that it's just gonna explode on social media.
Kind of like how you interact with the AI memes.
Yeah, absolutely. But they know that it will do that. They know that it'll just go bang, and they don't have to pay advertisement or to put billboards up. That it's just going to pump itself, because it's just people get so upset that there'll be a certain amount of people who love it, a certain amount of people hate it, but they don't care as long as people are going to watch it. That's the thing. But okay, I have one thing to finish on. But my other last point was you said about the newspapers, and it reminded me of something, Richard, that I think we're in a really scary time when like newspaper company, like newspaper and like real quote unquote, like the proper media start using the bait tactic in their headlines to get people to read. And they also use this kind of like sensationalization, which I think a lot of like media companies are starting to do. And I don't know if either of you like follow the Labour Party on Facebook. For some reason, the Labour Party keeps coming up in my feed. Right. Don't know why, but they've now started to do like sensational, just like block posts of like. So one of them was this one. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. It's literally just like a text post that says, "With Labour, illegal working arrests and raids have gone up by 50%," and they just know that like that text quote will just get people arguing. Like if you look like the last post of the last week, every day there's been one of these text posts that literally just is like, all right. The other one was, "We said we would stop at nothing to secure our borders. We meant it," which is, I think, was quite weird coming from Labour. But yeah, it's like they know that this like real, just bang this out online. That's literally all it says. That's the post from the Labour Party, and then they just know everybody in the comments will just argue to death, and it will just make the post bigger. And I think it's a scary time when political parties are even adopting this tactic to get. And we're in a slippery world, I think, of what is even true.
I think news anymore has always been like that since the first printing press was invented. Yep. I think it's just the way the information is shoved down your throats is different now. I think the scarier thing about news in general is that when you see that certain who owns the news, and who owns the information, and they have choice, and sometimes it's countries and governments having that choice. But now if it's the government, they're sending out and disseminated by another company, and that is following algorithm, and that's how it's getting shoved down your throat, and it's people's interpretation of the news. What annoys me as well sometimes, and it's not just on the government, is if you look on any kind of like Facebook or Instagram post, when it's like they'll do a headline which won't give what the actual the news is, and you'll have to click on it, and it's just to sell advertising things. There'll be like a little news story inside that, so it will give you a little brief light to make you kind of go, "Oh, what's that? I will have to click on this." But I think, even when the printing press was done and people were shouting on corners, or people were getting things nailed to doors, of like, "Oh, these people don't belong here," it's always been the same.
I think has always been
sensationalized to a certain extent. Like, imagine like stuff from, I don't know, like 1890, where it's like crime of the century. Yeah. Read on page 4.
But I think there seemed to be a bit more of an independent journalistic integrity. I think,
but I also think it's a lot of apathy from us, the people, as well. That we just take it these days. Yeah. We're quite happy to doom scroll and click on the most depressing story, the most depressing story, the most depressing story, the most depressing story, instead of looking at kids. Yeah. Although that's a nice way to do it too. But I think we're part of the problem too.
Yeah, I 100% think we are. But I will say, as kind of a little switcheroo to that, I have one last point to make, and that is kind of it is a weird way related to that sensationalism and kind of the dark turn that we talked about, but also harkening back to like historical accuracy / inaccuracy of, popular media and television. And that is that, in my experience, what has surprised me the most, but maybe shouldn't, is that usually the most accurate historical interpretations that I can find from like historical settings are usually like comedic shows or movies. Like,
Norsemen.
The Norsemen. 100% when it comes to Viking Age representation. It's not like it's 100%, but it's actually pretty damn good. Way better than Vikings, although I haven't seen all of Vikings. We can get into that later. But I was not able to do as your friend did, Richard, and turn my brain off. I've tried multiple times. I just haven't been able to.
It got really bad. Really bad.
Yeah. But then also, like, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It's like not really that bad. Like like it's not, again, not 100%, but like a 70s presentation of like medieval times in England and France actually isn't all that bad. Yeah. It's pretty good.
I prefer Life of Brian, but Monty Grail, Holy Grail is fantastic. But Life of Brian is just
Life of Brian also
it's fantastic.
Mwah.
Yeah.
They do great stuff. I love Monty Python. Okay, we do need to wrap up because we have to do our smut episode soon, but we do also need to fit in a little Q&A as well. But to wrap up the main show quick fire is the emphasis on this for all three of us. Your number one myth that you, if you can think of one off the top of your head, that like maybe people think is real but isn't. Is there one that like springs to mind that like that is like a bugbear? I don't know. Maybe Richard, is there one that commonly you see in the museum that just stands out?
It's gonna really disappoint people. The myth that we have dinosaurs when we don't. The myth. There's a couple. I could go on for. There's a whole different show on this one. The things that people think existed. Sweeney Todd's razor blades. People think we've got the flame that Prometheus brought down, and we've asked which gallery that was in. That was an interesting one. But then I also, without making it go dark, is what point do you call it myth or religion, and people's belief systems in that one, because that's a whole different debate. But yeah, I think my favorite question I've got asked is, where is Prometheus? What gallery is Prometheus flame in? And it's hard to, but I had to break it to a child that when they said, where's the fossils of unicorns? And I had.
Oh no. That's almost like telling them the Santa isn't real.
I know, but now there's an exhibition at Colchester Castle on mythical creatures, and they do have a unicorn section. So if they'd have asked me that, I could say go to Colchester Castle, and it'll be on until March if you're around Colchester Castle. It's a fantastic exhibition. Sorry, I'm just plugging other museums,
cool.
But
that's great.
So yeah, Prometheus.
But I've had a similar experience with the. Yeah, I've had a similar experience with like. This was just one instance, but with an older gentleman, completely 100% serious, asking me where Ormenlange or Ormenlangi was in the Viking ship museum, which is the legendary ship of Olav Tryggvason, which is mentioned in a lot of sagas. And I was like, oh, I am so sorry. That is a legendary ship. And he was like, no, I remember that they found it. Where is it?
Oh, God.
And I was like, And I just kind of had to very gently say to him, if that is the case, it is not exhibited here.
Yep.
That's probably a whole other episode as well, of people telling people who work in museums that they're wrong and they are actually right. And also the amount of people that must say, I was descended from this person. And that happens all the time as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, we are wrapping up. We are wrapping up. My myth that I had that I learned was the gladiators didn't actually always fight to the death and kill each other. That it was a lot of theater, and they would like slash like the fatty deposits at like the front and be like wounded, and it wasn't this bloodthirsty thing that everyone thinks from like the movies, that every battle was like to the death, when a lot of the time they would survive and they would just kind of go on and do it again. It was a show,
or just fight animals,
not just
or archery and stuff.
And they would have there was having like reports of like guys who would like throw like fruit and snacks into the crowd and like stuff that dropped down from. So it was like a theater show, not just like a bloodthirsty thing, which I really enjoyed to learn, because I thought it was like the movie Gladiator with
I've not even bothered with number 2. Just
no, I haven't.
Me neither.
did you have a myth, or is it just the?
Well, I'm having a hard time picking, but I don't know how fun they are. But I mean, it's my biggest annoyance, if I'm talking from a Viking Age perspective, is probably the very either or conceptualization of, which is kind of our fault in the dissemination of the Viking Age, of like people were either raiders or farmers, period. And women always had keys on their dresses.
They did always have keys. They fucking loved keys, women.
But here's the thing.
I see
keys are
that
great.
all the time.
I mean, I'm
Women
not saying that
love
the keys weren't there, but it's very much like the men fought or they farmed, and the women had keys to the house, period.
They just sat
and then
there
I'm
with
like,
the keys.
Yeah, just
all the time, just like, these are my keys.
Yeah, just walking around like they had a fancy brooch or something on their hip, just being like,
I'm sorry, but I guarantee that just the everyday house in the Viking Age on the farm in the Viking Age didn't have a lock on the front door.
No, why would they? It's so much
exactly,
safer with like a wooden beam on the inside. I'm not saying that we have evidence of that either, but
but it's just like but it paints this idea that like everybody had like a lock to the front door. Like
we don't even know if the lock, if the key was for a lock at all, or if it was for lock, if it was for a door. That is a modern also perception. It could have been for
maybe
a
a chest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. That was my myth.
There we go. Anyway, all right, let's wrap it up because we do have to do a quick Q&A and then we have to do our smut, which I'm looking forward to because it's your turn to read, Mags.
Yes, it is.
And I'm excited for that.
I am not.
Well, I am. So, Richard, where can people find you if they would like to follow you and see your lovely posts?
Richard K. Wakeman at the moment. But on Thursday I get married. I'm at some point going to take my future wife's name, so that might change. But at the moment, it's Richard K. Wakeman on Instagram, and me and a colleague are also starting a separate one for cemeteries. So watch this space. We'll announce it soon. Or Old World Remains for the tattoo studio too.
And congratulations for
Thursday.
That's
wedding number one. We're also getting.
Oh my god!
Yes, we're getting married on Thursday in London, and then in September we're going to Italy, where Gloria is from, in Monte Cassino, so all our family can come to it. So we're doing two.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Oh my god! Congratulations!
Yeah, it's
exciting!
It's very exciting. We're very, very busy and having some crazy stuff going on. So some of which we can't talk about, but can only announce in November. Hopefully, some very, very cool things are happening.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's going to be great.
There we go. Mags, where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at archaeomags, Archeo with a K.
There we go. For me, Daniel_Farrand1, Horns of Odin for the business, and then Nordic Mythology podcast across the board on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Hit the little like and subscribe button on YouTube. And that's it. We'll see you Tuesday, I think.
Bye.
There you go.